Brother's going to work it out by Public Enemy here on Democracy Now!, the War and Peace Report. 30 years ago today, New York became the first state in the nation to require harsh prison sentences for all drug offenders. The new laws were pushed through the state legislature in 1973 by then-Governor Nelson Rockefeller. The laws require a minimum sentence of 15 years for minor possession of drugs. Enforcement of the laws rarely hit drug kingpins. Instead, judges were forced to imprison mostly first-time, low-level, nonviolent drug offenders. Most of them are poor, most people of color. Dozens of other states and the federal government rushed to adopt their own version of the Rockefeller drug laws when New York set the precedent. Today, New York and California alone retain their mandatory minimum sentences. The movement to scrap the laws is continuing to grow. Last year, former New York Senator John Dunn appeared in a TV commercial. He said, quote, "In 1973, I sponsored the Rockefeller drug laws, which have been a well-documented failure." Well, today we're going to have a discussion about those drug laws, and we'll start with a personal story. Anthony Papa, convicted of a first-time nonviolent drug possession charge in 1985. How many years did you spend in jail, Anthony?
Hi, Amy. I spent 12 years of a 15 to life sentence. I was sentenced to Sing Sing prison. Eventually, I was granted clemency in 1997 by Governor George Pataki. When I got out, I made it a point to fight these laws. I joined the forces with Randy Credico and the mothers that had disappeared. And basically, we've been out there since 1998, protesting against these laws, asking the governor to change them. And for the first time in the history of politics, in 2001, a governor of New York State called for reform, which was Governor Pataki. The Assembly and the Senate followed his cue, but for 2 years they've been bickering over what changes should be made. And while this bickering is going on through this political rhetoric, people are wasting away in prison and family members are giving up.
What did you actually do?
I passed an envelope of 4.5 ounces of cocaine for $500. I was set up in a sting operation in Westchester County through a friend I met in a bowling alley. I was desperate, like the carrot dangling on the string. I went for it, and I made the biggest mistake of my life. But
did you have a record?
I had no record. I was a first-time nonviolent offender, but yet I was sentenced to actually 2 15-year-to-life sentences. And the judge ran them together, and I served a sentence of 15 years to life. And the only way I got out was when I was granted clemency by Governor Pataki in 1997.
You painted in prison.
Right. I became a painter, discovered my talent as an artist, and actually I painted my way out of prison. You could actually see my work on my website at 15yearstolife.com, and you can read all about
it's 15 years, like the number 15?
Right.
15 years?
To life.com, and you can see actually a representation of my life in prison, what I went through. And you could read all about the war on drugs and the mothers in New York disappeared. When I came out in 1997, I appeared on the show C-SPAN, and Randy Credico saw me on TV, and he wanted to get together and with the William Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice, wanted to do something about the war on drugs. So he followed me, tracked me down, and we decided to get together. We came up with this idea of organizing against the Rockefeller drug laws, and we created this group, which in 5 years changed the face of the war on drugs in New York State. At first, when I went to Albany, I lobbied, I talked to the politicians. They had a duo type of persona in reference to what the drug laws were about. They had the public view was totally draconian. Yeah, this is good. This is what we need. But behind doors, they said, look, we know these laws don't work, but we can't do anything about it because we'll look soft on crime and lose our seats. And because of their political careers, they wouldn't come out. But what we did is we went to the streets, took the people to the streets and protested for 5 years through rain, sleet, and snow, and convinced the public that these laws are draconian in nature. There's over 68,000 people in prison, over 18,000 are in there under the Rockefeller Drug Laws. 94% are black and Latino. And these are many men and women that have made mistakes in their life, but they're stuck there because of mandatory minimum sentencing. These laws are definitely terrible, draconian, strictly punitive. And there are other ways to solve problems. A lot of people are addicted to drugs, people who are marginalized, disenfranchised, get caught up in these laws. They know nothing about them, and all of a sudden it's too late. And because of mandatory sentencing, they're sentenced to 15 years to life.
Randy Credico is one of those major forces of the William Moses Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice. Compare the sentences, and these are sentences that judges, they absolutely have no discretion, or can they defy the state?
No, they can't. It's up to the prosecutor. In many cases, we're talking about 25-year-old prosecutors just out of law school, building their careers off the backs of poor black and Latino young kids. That's what they do. And he had 25, like Tony Papa got 15 to life. Joel Steinberg, who killed his kid, got 8 1/3 to 25 years. I don't want to, put one against another. I mean, you can get 3 years for rape, 4 years for rape. And you can, embezzle $1 million. That's the same as selling 1 dime bag of cocaine, or possessing a quarter gram of cocaine, embezzling $1 million, or stealing $1 million. That's called a B felony. There are people doing, 5 years. Sammy Gravano did 5 years for killing 21 people. Yet someone like this guy here, Terrence Stevens, if you can get a close-up of Terrence Stevens here, here's a guy paralyzed from the neck down for possession, did 15 years to life. He did 10 years. 10 years for possession of a small amount of cocaine in that condition. He'll be there today when we have a rally in front of Governor Pataki's office.
We're also joined on the phone right now by Russell Simmons. Christian Science Monitor says it's called raptivism, and some analysts believe it has the potential of the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s to transform America's political landscape. The latent power of the movement became evident last June when almost 100,000 young people descended on New York City Hall, joining teachers and labor activists to protest Mayor Bloomberg's proposed more than $350 million cut in education funding. They came because rap entrepreneur Russell Simmons put out the call. He also enticed them with a lineup of the industry's hottest hip-hop stars, such as Jay-Z and Chuck D. Mr. Simmons is founder of Def Jam Records, argues hip-hop has always been the outlet for poor people's frustration, and if it parlays that energy into a political grassroots movement, it can transform the nation. He's linking up with the NAACP on a Get Out the Vote campaign, with the Urban League on a literacy program, is taking on the peace issue, and is now getting involved with the Drop the Rock campaign, as it's called, overthrowing the Rockefeller Drug Laws. He's on the line with us right now. Russell Simmons, welcome to Democracy Now!
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
No,
Well, can you talk about why you're involved?
Well, I grew up, a lot of my friends went to jail under these laws. They were nonviolent, they were not criminal, they were sedating themselves, and they ended up coming home criminals and repeat offenders now, many of them. And so I've seen the effects of the Rockefeller Drug Law, as have everyone in the hip-hop community. Hip-hop community is the voice of voiceless poor people. And so they've all experienced, family members or friends who've had been under the knife for the Rockefeller Drug Law. And I've seen, I admire and applaud all the work that's been done by the people who brought us to this page. And the fact that Governor Pataki is making statements of support for a repeal of these laws is good news. I believe now, with the young people's support, that the governor, we are going to start on today. We're going to have a press conference, and we've gotten a coalition of people who support us. You did say the NAACP and the Urban League and MoveOn.org and, Chuck Schumer and Senator Clinton and, there's a long list. But when we call the press, they're really excited that Puffy's going to be there. They're excited that Jay-Z's going to be there. And I know that with all of the hip-hop media, which are the #1 radio stations in this city, and with MTV and with BET and with the awareness campaign, the governor may need someone to push. He needs people to be aware of how unjust these laws are, so maybe he won't look soft on crime. But anyway, it doesn't matter because he has 30 days from today. We're going to start a countdown to fairness. We want to see dramatic push on the part of he and all of the legislators around him. Or we're going to continue to push. And I know that as people understand, 80% of the people who understand this law are against it in this state. So we know that he may need a little push, but this is so unfair and unjust. And it's not, we understand that 94.5% of the people are black and brown. When that whites sell and use drugs as much as African Americans. Understand how unjust and how and when the prosecutors make a decision whether to make this person, put this person under this form of the law or that form of the law, then they make a decision to send this, what looks like, based on a stereotype. There is no greater example of racial profiling than this. But it's not, but it's just so obvious. The money that we waste. And I don't want to go on because he made all of the points very clear, but the amount of money in a budget crisis, I mean, aside, the human factor obviously is the first and most important one. But the money, $1 billion. I mean, not only the amount to keep $50,000 per year that it keeps each person in, 15 years, that's $750,000. And all the system the things around, except for the $50,000, that they amortize the cost, it adds up to $1 billion a year in the state of New York. And so they're funding this prison industrial complex with these people's bodies. And I know that as people start to understand, I know that Hot 97 and Power 105 and MTV and BET and The Voice, I noticed the other day they talked about the riot in Iraq and the fight with the soldiers. There was a little tiny piece in the corner of the paper, but there was a huge story on Damon Dash's birthday party. You don't know Damon Dash, but he's the head of Rockefeller Records. Damon Dash and all of his artists are committed. All of the Def Jam artists are committed. All the Loud artists are committed. We haven't started to build our coalition. So all the people who I named are the beginning of a strong coalition. I know that in 30 days we're going to feel it. We can either celebrate the governor or we can really continue a sustained effort to show how unjust and how unfair he is for not making a dramatic change right now.
Russell Simmons on the line with us. Randy Credico, right now it's the governor who makes this decision. You've been battling him for years on this. Where is he now? You've been meeting with him along with Anthony Papa and many other people, many of the mothers of the disappeared, as you call them, women in prison or mothers of those in prison.
We've met with him a couple of times, most recently about 7 months ago, and he came up with a proposal that would have actually placated the group that we're involved with, which is the Vanguard, with like maybe 50 of the women who have kids in prison would have had their sentences cut possibly.
That's bullshit.
And thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
I agree. I mean, that's what he offered us, and these women said no. I mean, they could have taken that deal, and I mean, we're talking about people like Miguel Arenas' mother, Norma Arenas, who's 78 years old. She can't make it today because she can't move from her bed. She's got asthma. She's nearly blind. She has one loved one left in life. He's up at a prison in his 10th year for a possession charge, a very small one. That guy did 4 years in the Air Force, and so she can't make it today. Those are the kind of people that Governor Pataki is stiffing.
And they would have themselves benefited.
They would have benefited because they would have gotten out, possibly. The A1 felonies only. Now, the majority are small dime bag people that get caught with a dime bag and they get 8 1/3 to 25 years. But the vanguard of this group, which is the A1 felonies, you got about 700 of those, and that's who we represent. And people like Mrs. Arenas, she said no to the governor, and the governor, it was very cynical for him to offer this kind of deal.
Anthony Papa.
I'd just like to say something that the governor is definitely to blame for this, but also is Sheldon Silver, because there's a stonewalling effect here. And I've been to Albany, and I see what's going on. And there are two personality clashes between the governor and the Assembly leader, Sheldon Silver. They all agreed in 2001 that change should be made. But for 2 years, they've been bickering with each other on what types of change, nitpicking each other, positive and negatives in each other's other submitted bills. I think Russell Simmons is right on point. Let's give him a countdown. 30 days. React, or the people are going to take the streets and flood your office with 100,000 people in front of your office. They don't want to see that. So I think this is going to be definitely a dramatic effect on the outcome of the future of Rockefeller drug laws.
The biggest obstacle, of course, are the New York State prosecutors, including the State Attorney General Elliot Spitzer, who everyone thinks is a progressive. He's running for governor in a couple of years. He hasn't come out. We've met with him. But the 62 prosecutors are the ones that are really blocking real change. And we're talking about all but one happens to be white, and that's Bob Johnson, who's the from the Bronx, who, you know, arguably is the Clarence Thomas of New York City. So you have 61 people who are really blocking real reform. They're scaring, you know, the legislators and the governor and the majority leader in the Senate. If they would get out of the way, we could really, because 88% of the people in the state of New York in a recent poll support major reform. We support repeal, but support major reform in the Rockefeller drug laws.
So today, 11 o'clock, there's going to be a news conference. Who's going to be there?
Russell can tell you that. We will be. The mothers of the New York disappeared. Russell, who will be there today? Is Russell on the line still?
Yeah, I don't know if they cut me off. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Russell.
Quaid Nfume can't be there, the NAACP, but his major representative, Milton, who runs the Urban League, will be there. The ACLU leadership will be there, and Puffy will be there. There's a lot. Ben Chavis, by the way, is helping to organize this. Andy Cuomo, of course, one of the persons who brought this to my attention. Yesterday, I met with a Gallicino who's going to help us to fund, and we did the last thing in 4 days' time. We brought 100,000 people. We have a month. Ben Chavis, who runs the Hip Hop Summit Network, who you may know from, he was the head of the NAACP. He was on the President's Transition Team. He was he did the Million Man March. Ben Chavis is going to organize this with us, and we all, gone to work over the last week or so. But I know that we're going to celebrate the mayor by June 4th. I'm convinced, because the governor. I'm sorry, and I know Shelley Silver and all those people. They may have felt that they looked soft on crime, but they're going to look unjust and backwards if we don't get some real reform. So and reform. I don't really, repeal is the word we have to use. The judges have to make the decisions. And I know this is a national issue, because when we top a list, there are a lot of unjust laws about nonviolent criminals who are in jail for long periods of time and fueling these prison industrial complexes. And they spend $2 billion building these prisons, and we don't have education. It's really prison over education. And it's obvious it's business first and not people first, and the people are not as educated as you think. Like Tom Gallicino, who's going to help us yesterday came to my office and he pledged his support, and we've never had real money, but to have some money behind this operation, I know that we're going to have dramatic change within the next 30 days.
Right. Yes, okay. So that press conference is at 11 o'clock at the Grand Hyatt in the...
that's a start.
Right, in the Booth Imperial Room. In the Booth Imperial Room, we have a broad new coalition called Campaign for Fairness. It's a 30-day countdown, June 4th, at a location that we will unveil today. At noon, after the press conference, there will be a major rally. There are other people right now rallying in front of the governor's office on a hunger strike. We'll be joining them with the Mothers of New York Disappeared, Russell Simmons, Al Lewis, and tons of others at 40th and 3rd at noon. 40th and 3rd in Manhattan at noon.
Well, I want to thank you all for being with us. Russell Simmons on the line with us, hip-hop promoter. Randy Credico of the William Moses Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice. Anthony Papa, his book will be coming out in a year. Look forward to reading it. When we come back, we're going